There's a special kind of silence that happens when an American confidently explains history to the people who wrote it. It's a particular weighted quiet, distinct from a simple pause. It's the moment an assumption proudly held makes contact with a deep and well-documented bedrock of fact. It's less about the correction itself and more about the seismic shift in perspective that follows. This isn't about simple factual errors or an inability to Google. It's about what unfolds when a culture meticulously crafted on the idea of self-invention meets the enduring, tangible archives of the old world. We cross oceans armed with boundless optimism, a strong Wi-Fi signal, and an earnest conviction in our narrative. But sometimes, tucked between the guidebooks and passport, is a version of history that's been carefully edited for domestic consumption, a highlight reel missing a few crucial scenes from the first and second acts. Picture the scene in a cozy, dimly lit pub in Bristol, the air thick with the scent of ale and aged wood. An American tourist, emboldened by his first pint, gestures expansively to the locals gathered at the worn oak bar. You know he begins, his voice carrying the friendly certainty of a Midwestern accent. You've got to hand it to Thomas Edison. That man, he truly lit up the world. There's a beat of silence. A British man across the table, fingers laced around his own glass, takes a slow, deliberate sip. He sets it down with a soft click. Joseph Swan, actually, he says, his tone not confrontational, but clarifying. Like a librarian pointing to a different shelf. Newcastle upon Tyne, 1878. His house was the first in the world to be lit by electric light bulbs. Edison? Well, he saw the commercial potential, made it viable for the masses. The American's brow furrows, his smile faltering for just a second as he processes this. So, you're saying he improved on the British model? Made it work better. The Brit offers a thin, almost imperceptible smile. We prefer to think he was intelligent enough to recognize a rather bright idea when he saw one. Around them, a low chuckle ripples through the pub. It's not mockery, not exactly. It's a warmer, more knowing sound, the sound of centuries of shared history politely, firmly disagreeing with a newcomer's script. Or consider the hallowed, echoey halls of the Science Museum in London. A mother from Chicago, dressed in a vibrant windbreaker, points a determined finger at a display case holding a primitive, boxy camera. "Look, honey," she says to her teenage son, her voice brimming with patriotic pride. Right there. That's where American innovation really began, capturing memories for everyone. As if summoned by the inaccuracy, a passing curator in a tweed jacket clears his throat softly, a gentle auditory nudge. William Henry Fox Talbot, he corrects, his voice a calm, scholarly baritone. An English gentleman and scientist. He created the first photographic negative in the 1830s, right here in England. The calotype process, so the woman's enthusiastic expression melts into a frown. She squints at the informational placard as if it might change under her gaze. But Kodak. George Eastman. That's all American. The curator nods, conceding the point with a slight tilt of his head. The brand? Yes. The corporate empire? Absolutely. The fundamental concept of fixing an image onto a surface. Rather earlier, I'm afraid. Her son, phone in hand, gives her sleeve a desperate tug. "Mom," he whispers, mortified, it literally says Lecoq Abbey. England right there on the sign. She looks at him, then back at the case. Her face a canvas of confusion that slowly hardens into a different kind of betrayal. The betrayal isn't aimed at the polite British expert, but inward, at the ghost of her own fifth-grade history teacher. At the textbook that presented a simpler, cleaner, more nationally flattering story travel to Shropshire, to the cradle of the Industrial Revolution and stand on the world's first iron bridge. A majestic, arching testament to Georgian engineering. A cheerful Texan, impressed by the structure's enduring strength, turns to a group of British hikers taking in the view. Remarkable, he booms. It has the same gutsy spirit as our steel structures back in Pittsburgh. You can see the inspiration. An older hiker, his face weathered by English rain and sun, adjusts his flat cap and turns slowly. "It would do, sir," he says, his voice carrying the soft burr of the West Midlands. Seeing as this bridge was cast and built before Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania had proper paved streets, let alone a steel mill. It's not inspired by Pittsburgh. It's the reason Pittsburgh eventually existed. The American lets out a hearty, unoffended laugh, deflecting the correction with charm. A prototype, then? The brilliant first draft. The hiker's smile is patient, enduring. A precedent, he corrects gently. One might say, this phenomenon points to a core truth in America. History is often taught and absorbed as a highlight reel, a three-act structure where we make a dramatic, triumphant entrance in the final act. We are the problem solvers, the perfecters, the savvy commercializers who take a good idea and make it great for the world. Our national education isn't a deliberate falsehood. It's a powerfully abridged version, a narrative shaped by the need to build a cohesive identity from 1,000 disparate threads. We are taught that Edison invented the light bulb, full stop. The nuance of simultaneous discovery of prior art, of Joseph Swan's glowing carbonized paper thread in England, is often lost. We learn that the Wright brothers achieved powered flight, a glorious truth that can sometimes obscure the decades of glider experiments and theoretical work in Europe. This narrative isn't malicious in its intent. It's motivational. It's the story of a young nation breaking free from the past and forging its own destiny. But when this streamlined, empowering script collides with the full, dense, often contradictory, and meticulously cataloged manuscript held in the old world, the plot twists aren't just surprising, they can be profoundly humbling. It's the difference between reading a thrilling biography and suddenly gaining access to the subject's complete, unedited diaries with all the messy, complicated, and collaborative truths they contain. The pattern repeats in museums, on tours, in casual conversations. In a York Railway Museum, standing before the polished, iconic form of a pioneering steam engine, a father from Ohio puffs out his chest. This, he announces to his weary family, is the very spirit of American industry. The power that built a continent, a volunteer docent, clad in a crisp blazer bearing a museum pin, glides over with the quiet efficiency of a butler. That's Stephenson's rocket, I'm afraid. He interjects gently, his tone apologetic but firm. Built by George and Robert Stephenson in Newcastle. Won the Rainhill trials in 1829. British through and through. Dad doesn't miss a beat. He waves a dismissive, congenial hand. Of course. The initial spark. And then American ambition, our scale, our vision, took that idea and ran with it across a whole continent. His teenage daughter, immersed in the acute embarrassment only adolescents can fully feel, brings her palm to her forehead with a soft smack. "Dad," she hisses through gritted teeth, "we're literally in Yorkshire." In England, he beams back at her, utterly unscathed, his patriotic narrative force field fully engaged. And the dream it inspired, he proclaims, is universal. On a leisurely boat tour on the Thames, an American woman, smartphone in hand, calls out to the guide. "So, when did you folks start putting GPS on these riverboats? Must make navigation a breeze now." The guide, a man with a well-practiced, dry wit, grins. "Oh, roughly 2 millennia before the first satellite went up, I'd reckon. The Romans were quite adept at navigating this old river. Didn't need a battery pack." She nods, assimilating this into her framework. Right. Ancient history. But America, we mastered modern navigation. Satellites, digital mapping, all of that. The guide tilts his head, his expression one of playful pity. John Harrison's marine chronometer, H4, he states, solved the longitude problem, one of the greatest scientific challenges of its age. Built in London, awarded the prize by the Board of Longitude in 1759. That was the true key to modern global navigation. She blinks, the name meaning nothing to her. Who? The guide's smile widens, reaching its intended destination. Precisely, he says. The single word carrying the weight of an entire forgotten chapter. The dynamic extends beyond engineering. In a classic London chemist shop, a young American, perhaps a business student, makes a sweeping declaration to the pharmacist at the counter. You have to admit, modern medicine as we know it. You can thank American science and funding. Antibiotics, vaccines, anesthesia, we revolutionized it all. The pharmacist, methodically bagging her purchases of aspirin and plasters, doesn't even look up. Penicillin. Alexander Fleming, a Scotsman, discovered it in 1928. First successful vaccine, Edward Jenner, an Englishman. For smallpox in 1796. First practical use of surgical anesthesia, using ether, pioneered by Scotsman James Young Simpson in the 1840s. He finally meets her gaze, his eyes calm behind his glasses. She is frozen, credit card held midway between her purse and the terminal. So, what did we actually do? She asks, her confidence visibly deflating. He hands her the printed receipt with a faint, professional smile. You industrialized it, packaged it, marketed it with exceptional, world-leading efficiency. That is also a form of genius. This recurring theme reveals a foundational metaphor. Confidence is America's national currency, and we are remarkably liberal spenders of it, often on historical narratives we only partially own. It's a form of cultural collateral we confidently put down. Every nation possesses a kind of mental cartography, an internal map of how the world works and where things come from. The American map, for many, can resemble an architect's blueprint, where the United States sits as the central drafting table. Arrows of innovation and influence seem to radiate outward from this table to the rest of the globe. We don't always perceive human progress as a vast, messy, international relay race, a baton passed from hand to hand across centuries and continents, with many runners contributing to the final pace. Instead, the story can feel like a solo sprint. And we are the charismatic athlete photographed breaking the tape at the finish line, sometimes forgetting the other runners who set the pace, defined the lanes, or even handed us the baton in the final stretch. The conversations continue, each a miniature case study. In a sun-dappled Edinburgh cafe, an American exchange student debates her Scottish flatmate. Alexander Graham Bell, American hero. The telephonette connected the world. Her friend, stirring a cup of tea, raises a single skeptical eyebrow. Born in Edinburgh, educated here and in London, moved to Boston later in life, where he did his most famous work. The patent was American. The man was Scottish. Psh. The American frowns, trying to reconcile this. So, it's a joint effort. A transatlantic collaboration. The Scot laughs, a warm, forgiving sound. It's simply a fact. We're generally quite generous with giving credit where it's due. We're just less attached to the idea of exclusive ownership. At a sophisticated London dinner party, amidst the clink of fine crystal, an American businessman in a sharp suit makes a declarative toast. Here's to American ingenuity in the industrial age. Our coal mining technology, perfected in the hills of Pennsylvania, powered a century of growth. A Welsh guest across the table, a man with a quiet demeanor, carefully sets down his glass of red wine. We were pulling coal from the dark veins of the earth here in Wales, he says, his voice soft but clear. Before Pennsylvania was even a name on a map drawn in a European court. The American? adept at turning challenges into opportunities, shrugs amiably. We industrialized it. We created the systems, the economies of scale. The Welshman offers a thin, knowing smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. We breathed it, he replies. For generations. It's a different kind of commitment, you understand? What becomes fascinating is the methodology of the correction itself. The classic British rebuttal is rarely a shout, a lecture, or a passionate argument. It is more akin to a surgical incision, precise, clean, and devastatingly effective. They possess a remarkable talent for allowing you to construct your entire argument, to lay out your assumptions brick by brick, building a seemingly sturdy little edifice of national pride. Then, with an almost casual grace, they point a single finger not at your building, but at the cornerstone upon which you've unwittingly built it. And on that cornerstone, carved in a different script, is an earlier date, a different name, a prior claim. That calm, understated precision is often misread by Americans as passive aggression or stuffy intellectual superiority. But it's something else. It's the quiet, unshakable confidence of someone who isn't just reading from a history book, but feels they are living on the very parchment it was written on. It's the assurance of holding the original deed to the land. While you are excitedly explaining your plans for the new porch you think you invented, this plays out in countless settings. In a dusty, charming antique shop in Bath, an American tourist runs her fingers over the keys of an old Remington typewriter. You Brits must love these old American classics. Such beautiful machinery. The elderly shopkeeper, polishing his spectacles with a cloth, responds without looking up. The first patent for a machine described as a writing machine was granted to a British inventor, Henry Mill, by Queen Anne in 1714. The concept is rather older than the brand. She stares at him, her nostalgic smile frozen. You're joking. He looks up, his eyes clear and serious behind his clean glasses. No, madam, he states plainly. We simply didn't feel the need to put a flag on every practical idea. The utility was the point. In a wood-paneled lecture hall at Cambridge, an American law student, eager to impress, argues a point in a seminar. The right to a trial by one's peers, it's the cornerstone of American justice, a foundational democratic ideal. The professor, a woman of formidable intellect and patience, peers over the rim of her spectacles. Magna Carta, Clause 39.1 to 15. Runnymede, England. No free man shall be seized or imprisoned, except by the lawful judgment of his equals or by the law of the land. The student, momentarily derailed, scrambles for footing. Well, yes, but we refined it. We made it a practical, living right for a modern republic. The professor allows a small, enigmatic smile. By adding television cameras and cable news commentary. Quite a fascinating refinement. This relentless pattern points to a psychological truth deeper than historical trivia. Often, in these moments, we are not merely defending an incorrect fact about the light bulb or the telephone. We are defending a piece of our constructed identity. To concede that a foundational element of the modern world, something we feel in our bones, is ours, actually originated in a pub in Newcastle or a workshop in London, can feel, on a visceral level, like a small surrender. It can feel like ceding a fragment of national mythos, the very stories that tell us who we are and what we have contributed. In this light, the confident rebuttal isn't just a personality trait. For many, it becomes a form of patriotism, a reflexive defense of the national narrative. The clashes move into the modern era with equally potent effect. In a sleek, glass-walled boardroom in Mayfair, a Silicon Valley executive raises a champagne flute during a welcome toast to American innovation. He booms, "To the greatest gift of our generation, to the world, the global internet." A truly American creation. At the end of the table, a British engineer, a key partner on the project, takes a slow sip of mineral water. Tim Berners-Lee, he says, his voice cutting cleanly through the celebratory air. A graduate of Oxford, conceived and implemented the first successful communication between a hypertext transfer protocol client and server via the Internet in late 1989, while working at CERN in Switzerland. The World Wide Web. The room's temperature seems to drop several degrees. The American executive's smile tightens, but he is a master of the pivot. But the commercialization, the platforms, the venture capital, the scale that connected billions. That was American genius. The British engineer nods, a picture of polite concession. Yes, you are absolutely correct. You brilliantly transformed a web of linked information and research into a global YOT, into a global marketplace for attention, commerce, and data. An astounding feat. It was delivered not as an insult, but as a clinical observation. Yet, in its razor-sharp precision, it felt more corrective than any argument. The geography of everyday life offers its own lessons. At a bustling Liverpool train station, an American tourist, map in hand, says to a local waiting for his commuter train, "It's so cool how you all adopted our subway system ideas over here. Makes getting around so easy." The local, hidden behind a spread-out newspaper, snorts audibly. He lowers the paper just enough to make eye contact. The London Underground, mate. First Metropolitan Railway line opened in 1863, ran on steam. Was a bit sooty, but it worked. The tourist's head tilts, his certainty cracking. Wait. Hold on. That's before the New York City subway. The commuter's eyes crinkle with amusement above his paper. By a good 4 decades or so, yes. He raises the paper again. A clear end to the conversation as the tourist stands on the platform, staring at the map as if it had personally rewritten his understanding of urban history. The most resonant and transformative moments, however, are often the personal ones, the corrections that land not on historical trivia, but on the core ideals we hold dearest. At a refined garden party in Oxford, amidst the scent of roses and the murmur of academic conversation, I once found myself holding forth, explaining to a small group how American political philosophy and its scalded constitutional ideals had fundamentally shaped and improved modern democratic practice for the world. It was a speech I'd given in my head 100 times, polished by years of national discourse. A historian, an elderly man who had been quietly tending a rosebush nearby with a pair of pruning shears, spoke without turning around. His voice was calm, weathered by time and knowledge. "We had a rather significant civil war right here in the 1640s, he said, snipping a dead head with a precise snip. The English Civil War fought largely over the authority of Parliament versus the Crown, the limits of executive power, and the very idea of representative government. You were still a scattering of colonies grappling with basic survival." I attempted to laugh it off. The standard defense. Well, we took those ideas and made them work for a large, diverse, modern republic. We built a system. He finally glanced over his shoulder, the shears glinting in the afternoon sun. His gaze was not unkind, but profoundly direct. "You packaged it," he stated simply, "in a brilliant, durable constitution. We planted the seeds through centuries of conflict, charter, and common law. The soil was ours. The plant is global now." The silence that enveloped me then was not awkward or hostile. It was dense, heavy with a new understanding. It was, without hyperbole, the most educational silence I have ever experienced. That silence leads to the ultimate revelation. The failure for an American in these situations is not the initial moment of being wrong. In a world of infinite information, being wrong is a common, forgivable state. The true failure, the uniquely awkward cultural misstep, is the instinct to cling to that wrongness as a point of pride, to double down on the national myth in the face of gentle, factual contradiction. What becomes clear is that every polite British correction, every patient redirection to an earlier date or a different name, is rarely intended as an attack on American character or achievement. It is something far more valuable, an invitation. An invitation to step out of the streamlined, nationalistic highlight reel and into the richer, messier, vastly more interesting and collaborative conversation of human history. It's an offer to exchange a patriotic monologue for a global dialogue. This shift in framing is everything. Humility encountered abroad in the face of deeper history isn't a defeat for the traveler. It's an intellectual and cultural upgrade. It's trading in a limited domestic edition of the past for the full International Director's Cut, complete with bonus features and commentary tracks from other civilizations. We often mistake British quiet, certainty for aloofness or stuffy tradition. They frequently perceive American loud, proud ownership as a fascinating, if occasionally baffling, cultural performance, a kind of energetic historical reinterpretation. One culture has learned, through long and often bloody experience, to value the unbroken, sometimes fragile, thread of continuity. The other, born from a deliberate break, celebrates the bold rewrite, the fresh start, the power of reinvention. Both perspectives are valid. They are simply the products of vastly different historical journeys. So, the next time you witness or catch yourself participating in an American abroad confidently taking credit for the light bulb, the railway, the telephone, or the internet, understand the deep-seated impulse behind it. It is not, at its heart, arrogance. It is the echo of a national story we have all been told, a story where we are the ingenious, can-do protagonists who took the world's raw materials and built the modern age. Travel, at its best, is the shrewd, insightful editor that enters the narrative. It doesn't delete our chapter. It simply shows us the extensive, brilliant, and essential chapters that came before ours, written in other languages on other continents. It reveals that we are not the sole authors of the modern epic, but contributors to a sprawling, multi-authored, and ongoing saga. And honestly, that's a much better, more fascinating, and more connected story to be a part of anyway. If this exploration of cultural blind spots and historical humility resonates with you, if you've ever had your own assumptions gently unraveled on foreign soil, help Wines of Thought continue these important conversations. Hit the like button and let us know in the comments below. Where have you experienced your own most memorable historical or cultural reality check while traveling? Thanks for watching and for choosing to see the world and our place in its story with curious and open eyes.